Hi everyone, in this video we will discuss the rise and fall of Napoleon. We are going to look at how Napoleon influenced France, Europe, and the entire world. The text and objectives for this lesson are to explain the impact of Napoleon Bonaparte and the Napoleonic Wars on Europe, and we will also write a paragraph evaluating Napoleon's legacy in world history after the lecture. Alright, so let's talk about Napoleon's background. Napoleon was born and raised on the island of Corsica, which is off the coast of Italy. He was part of the lower nobility in Italy, and when he was about 10 years old, he was sent to a French military school. He did very well in school, and he quickly rose through the ranks in the military, and he was considered one of the greatest generals of all time. And at the time that Napoleon was rising to power within the military, France had been going through a lot of political turmoil. The revolution had taken place, and the king had been replaced by the Directory. Under the Directory, France remained at war with Britain, Austria, and Russia, and other European powers, and they continued to experience a lot of economic and social instability. So even the Directory was unpopular in France. Napoleon, during that time, continued to lead the French army, and he was able to defeat the Austrians in Italy. Everywhere that Napoleon went, he liberated people from their former rulers, and he also helped to set up new republics in the countries of Holland, Switzerland, and Italy on behalf of France. Because the Directory continued to grow in its unpopularity, Napoleon was able to seize control of the French government, using the military to overthrow the Directory. He also negotiated peace with European powers, even with Britain, France's bitter enemy. When in power, Napoleon instituted a lot of reforms that made him a quite popular dictator. He introduced a new legal system known as the Code Napoleon, which was based on equality and natural rights. He also promoted education, and he reached a settlement with the Catholic Church. Eventually, Napoleon wanted even more, so he wanted to become the Emperor of France. Usually, when someone is crowned emperor, the Pope has a ceremony and places the crown on the emperor's head, symbolizing that God has chosen this emperor to rule. During his ceremony, Napoleon actually took the crown out of the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head, symbolizing that he worked his way up and made himself emperor. As emperor, he defeated all of the European powers except Britain, and the French Empire continued to expand its influence. It conquered a lot of territory in Europe, and it had a lot of alliances in other countries. So Napoleon was able to put his relatives and his friends in positions of power in Italy, Germany, Holland, Poland, and Spain. Here is a map of Napoleon's empire while he was in control of France for about 15 years. The dark blue areas are areas that he directly controls, he's the emperor of, and these lighter blue areas are allies. So even though he doesn't directly rule over them, he has people in power who are loyal to him, and he pretty much tells them what to do. The rest are enemies, including Great Britain and the Austrian Empire, and of course Prussia and Russia. So Napoleon eventually loses favor with some people. He is very unpopular in Europe, mostly in the countries where he has a lot of influence over the government. So most of the countries in Europe are united against him. Napoleon continued to try to invade England and hurt them economically by implementing a boycott of British goods. He wouldn't let anyone in Europe trade with England, and he also tried to invade England unsuccessfully. This behavior by Napoleon awakened a lot of nationalist feelings throughout Europe and the desire to have him removed from power. So Napoleon's downfall came when he decided to invade Russia. He was overconfident about how well they could do in Russia, and he took an army of over 600,000 men into Russia, which was the largest man invasion of all time up to that point. The Russians could not defeat this grand army, so they began to retreat because the Tsar didn't want to surrender. And as they retreated, the Tsar ordered the Russians to burn everything. They burned all the shelters, they burned all the supplies, which meant that Napoleon was marching deeper and deeper into Russia. Winter was approaching, and that year was a particularly harsh winter, and their supplies were running out. So the French army found themselves stuck in Russia in the dead of winter, unable to supply the troops, dying from starvation, dying from the bitter exposure to the cold. They were becoming sick, they died of typhus, they died of hunger, and a lot of them even committed suicide or deserted Napoleon. So the Napoleonic Wars continued throughout Europe, but Napoleon's prestige and his military power had been diminished by his failed invasion of Russia. The European powers then invaded France, and they overthrew Napoleon. Napoleon was sent into exile. He was banished from France, and he was sent to the island to an island off the coast of Italy. The Allied powers brought back the old French royal family. So a descendant of Louis XVI becomes the next king of France, and he is now Louis XVIII. Louis XVIII guaranteed his subjects basic civil rights and a national legislature, so he was willing to share power with another governing body. Napoleon makes a comeback. He escapes from the island, and he raises enough support and enough military to take over France, but only for a brief time. This period is known as 100 days. He was defeated by the English again at the Battle of Waterloo, and this time, to not take any chances, he was sent to exile off the coast of Africa, and that is where he spent the rest of his days. Napoleon had a huge impact not only on France, but on Europe and the rest of the world. In France, he created stability, which was much needed after the disastrous revolution, by establishing the Code Napoleon, which treated citizens equally and gave them a fair justice system. In Europe, he introduced Europeans to a lot of revolutionary ideas. He also ended serfdom in the conquered territories, and he liberated the Jewish citizens in Germany. As far as the world is concerned, Napoleon did have a huge impact. He helped spread nationalism to other parts of the world, especially to Latin America. He also weakened Spain by fighting in the Napoleonic Wars, which caused it to lose its empire in Latin America. And he is also responsible for selling the Louisiana Territory to the United States. Napoleon had no interest in colonizing this territory. He needed money to fight the wars in Europe, and so he decided to get rid of it, and he sold it at a bargain to Thomas Jefferson, which expanded or doubled the size of the United States at the time. Alright, and that brings us to the journal entry. So in your notebooks, write a paragraph telling your opinion about Napoleon Bonaparte. So in your opinion, was Napoleon a positive or a negative force in world history? Make sure you support your answer with specific examples. And let's finish our notes. So after Napoleon was defeated, Europe wanted to find a way to restore order. So the Congress of Vienna was called, and this is a group of European rulers who met in Paris in 1814, and they met to settle issues that had arisen from the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. They restored many of the former rulers to their thrones, and they also restored the borders, breaking up Napoleon's empire. However, there were a lot of balls and meetings during this Congress of Vienna, but there were also some secret alliances formed. The British, the Russians, Austrians, and Prussians decided to meet privately without the other European powers present, and they were the ones who made all the major decisions themselves. Their goal was to restore the balance of power in Europe. The Congress wanted to make sure that no other country like France would ever become so powerful and start taking over others. So they distributed land to some of the other countries to prevent this. So Belgium was given to the Netherlands, the Rhineland was given to Prussia, Genoa was given to Savoy, and northern Italy was given to Austria. So these territories, instead of having independent leaders, were now going to be ruled by other people. There were a lot of disputes among some of the allies. For example, Russia wanted all of Poland, which was not granted to them, and Britain and Austria feared that if they give them this, that Russia would grow too powerful, kind of like France had. So Britain and Austria signed a secret treaty with the former enemy, France, to resist Russian aggression and expansion. Other issues that were addressed at the Congress of Vienna include steps to abolish the slave trade, which was eventually abolished, and an agreement to meet again in order to settle future disputes. So instead of going to war with one another, the European powers agreed that if there was a problem, they would meet to try to resolve it. So, nationalism, let's define that term because we used it a couple of times earlier. Nationalism is the belief that each ethnic group or nationality is entitled to its own government and national homeland. Now remember that the Congress of Vienna started giving territory to other people to rule. So the people living there had a great sense of nationalism. They wanted to be free. The Congress of Vienna, however, favored legitimacy. Legitimacy means maintaining traditional rulers. They wanted the monarchs to continue ruling over other people, and this was their preferred form of governance. So during the Metternich era, between 1815 and 1848, a man named Prince Clemens von Metternich of Austria was one of the leaders of the Congress of Vienna, and he's responsible for establishing a system in Europe that would stop revolutions throughout all of Europe using military force. So he was able to oppress people from rebelling, to stop the rebellions, especially in countries like Italy, Germany, and Poland. Using the military, they were able to stop revolutions there. However, there were some successes in revolutions. For example, the countries of Greece and Belgium did manage to gain their independence in 1830 because of these nationalist ideas. And in 1848, Europe was experiencing a lot of turmoil. The monarchy in France was replaced by the French Republic, and that inspired more revolutions in Europe. In Germany, for example, the liberals elected representatives to a parliament that they created themselves, but the Austrian and Russian army was sent in to crush the rebellion, defeat the revolutionaries, and stop their attempt at a democratic government. And this happened in many places throughout Europe in 1848. And that is the end of the lecture. If you guys have any questions, bring them to class, and don't forget that we have a quiz the next time we see each other. All right, thank you.